Welcome to episode 26 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Way of God, and we are still in the section of serving God, which is the fourth section in this book, and we're up to chapter 7. And chapter 7 deals with periodic observances or festivals. This chapter, the Ramchal is going to describe our obligations concerning the Sabbath and the high holidays and the various other required festivals or observances. In the previous chapter we dealt with the order of the day. Now the Ramchal is going to describe this periodic obligations. So the Ramchal begins. Periodic observances are those which are obligatory only on particular days of the year. These include abstaining from work on the Sabbath and sanctifying the Sabbath, abstaining from work and fasting on Yom Kippur, resting on the holidays and sanctifying them and their intermediate days, or Chol HaMoed, obligations regarding chametz and matzah, when they are applicable, the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, the sukkah and lulav on Sukkot, Rosh Chodesh, Hanukkah and Purim. The significance of these periodic observances will now be explained. The basic idea of the Sabbath is related to a fact which was mentioned earlier, namely that for the sake of the purpose of creation, most of what is found in the world is mundane and not holy. On the other hand, it was deemed necessary that creations also be given some holiness, so that the world's spiritual darkness does not overwhelm them. These matters, in their appropriate measures, were decided by the highest wisdom with absolute precision. How much of the dark and mundane will be necessary for creation, and how much of the holy must be added on. God delineated all of this in the proper measures, in terms of both quantity and quality, regarding time, space, and every other phenomena that exists in creation. Thus, the concept of time was divided into days, those which are mundane and those which are holy. Regarding the days which are holy, there are varying degrees of holiness, some being more holy than others, as deemed appropriate by God. Further, it was decreed that the great majority of days would be mundane and not holy, and the minority which are holy would only be in a number and measure that is necessary. However, it was decreed that the days would repeat themselves following a periodic cycle, which would be 7 days in length. 7 was the appropriate measure for the repeating cycle, for all creation came into existence over a period of 7 days, so that creation's entire being is contained in this number. Accordingly, it is fitting that this number of days be considered a complete cycle, for this cycle contains everything necessary for creation as a whole, no more being required, existence in its entirety having been completed within this interval. However, the cycle of days constantly repeats itself until the end of the 6,000 years, which will comprise the full span of physical human history. This cycle of 7 also exists on a larger scale, scanning all the years of human history. Existence is divided into 6 periods, each containing 1,000 years, followed by a 7,000-year period, which will be a period of rest. At the end of this large-scale cycle of 7, all existence will be renewed under a new organization and order, according to the highest wisdom's decree. In both cases, regarding the 7-day cycle and the large-scale cycle, it was decreed that the end of the cycle be holy, which would bring great elevation to the entire cycle. For even though most of the days of the cycle would be mundane and only 1/7 would be holy, which, as mentioned, is all the holiness that is necessary, still being that the holy component is the cycle's last component and serves as a seal on the cycle, the result is that the holy component rectifies and uplifts the prior days of the cycle, so that in the end all of man's days are made holy. The Sabbath, therefore, was a great gift that God gave to Israel, because his desire was that Israel be his holy nation. He did not give this gift to any of the rest of the nations in any sense, for the unique elevation which one experiences on the Sabbath is neither fitting nor intended for them. In light of the lofty spiritual level that can be attained on the Sabbath, the Jew on the Sabbath is obligated to behave in a way that suits the day. We explained previously that man is effectively lowered by having to cope with the physical world, his involvement causing him to be closely attached to the mundane and material, casting him down from the elevated status which is his due. On the Sabbath, man needs to become released from mundane attachment, for the Sabbath is higher than other days, and man thus must conduct himself in a manner consistent with the day's sublimeness. However, as long as man is in this world and is attached to his physical body, it is not possible for him to detach himself completely from the material side of existence and be entirely uninvolved. The divine wisdom did set a measure, however, as to how much man should sever his connection to the physical and how much attachment must remain. Man was then commanded to disengage himself up to the appropriate level and maintain that level for the entire Shabbos. This, in essence, is the idea of melachot, activities that are forbidden on Shabbos. Besides the fact that we are forbidden to do anything to damage the holiness that is transmitted on Shabbos, we are also commanded to honour the holiness. This includes such as observances as Shabbos delight or oneg Shabbos, as well as honouring the arrival of Shabbos with Kiddush and its departure with Havdalah. These and other particulars of observance all revolve around the same basic idea, that a person should conduct himself on the Sabbath in a way that is appropriate, in light of the great holiness that avails itself to him on that day. Man gives honour to the day's elevated nature and shows his recognition of its purpose, which is to promote greater closeness and attachment to God. One's intent also should be to afford honour to the one who gave us this wonderful gift. In fact, all these different observances relate to the Sabbath's holiness in all its particular aspects, and they follow from the day's inherent nature and commemorate the true benefits that it brings. The highest wisdom also decreed to give Israel additional sanctity by granting them holy days other than Shabbos, when the Jew receives various levels of holiness. None of these holy days, however, have as much influence and sanctity as Shabbos. The degree to which a person must abstain from worldly occupations on these days depends on the level of their influence. Various types of work are therefore forbidden on many of these days. Yom Kippur is the highest of these holy days, and therefore the prohibition against work is the most severe. Below this are the other festivals, and on a still lower level their intermediate days, in other words Chol HaMoed. Lower yet is the new moon, or Rosh Chodesh, when only women abstain from work. Finally, there are Hanukkah and Purim, when work is not curtailed at all. On Hanukkah, thanks are offered, and in addition to this, Purim is a time of joy. All these levels depend on the particular sustenance granted, which is the spiritual light that shines on that particular day. Besides the sanctification that exists to various degrees depending on the holiness of each particular day, there is another concept that is specific to each one. On each of these special days, something happens whereby at this time a great rectification was accomplished and a great light shone. The highest wisdom decreed that on every anniversary of this period a counterpart of its original light should shine forth, and the results of its rectification renewed to those who accept it. We are therefore commanded to observe Pesach with all its rituals to recall the Exodus. At the time of the Exodus, we experienced an extremely great rectification, and therefore on the anniversary of this event there shines forth a light that parallels the one that illuminated us then. Since the results of that rectification are renewed in us, we are obliged to keep all these rituals. Shavuos likewise involves a great rectification, since it is the time when the Torah was given. Sukkot involves the clouds of glory, as it is written in Vayikra 23 verse 43, "The future generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in Sukkot." Even though this is not celebrated on the anniversary of the Exodus, the Torah sets a time that is appropriate for its commemoration. Hanukkah and Purim also involve this same concept. The same is true of the days mentioned in the Scroll of Fasts, or Megillas Ta'anis. These days were annulled, however, because the Jews could not abide by them, and were therefore exempted from commemorating them to stimulate their original light. We will now explain each of these observances separately. But that is the end of this chapter and the end of this episode, and we will discuss those in the next episode, the seasonal commandments, like Pesach and so on. But that was a fascinating episode. So what we can glean from what the Ramchal is telling us is that essentially the high holidays were based on in historical great rectifications. And it seems that although they are enjoyable to take part in these festivals, there's something deeply metaphysical behind this, as is with a lot of our religion. It seems like the light that was shone through these rectifications in history is somehow echoes on the same day, the same period that they were effected originally throughout generations. And if we observe them, we keep that light alive. But it's fascinating to hear the way the Ramchal describes this as again, rectificational lights are shone somehow metaphysically, and we can take part in that light even though the original event happened thousands of years previously. So fascinating, that by the Ramchal. And I look forward to next episode. We're going to do chapter 8, which again deals with seasonal commandments.